Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Almost Dropouts podcast. My name is Daivik, and today I have Aradhya once again.
How's it going? Happy to be back on the show.
Yeah, man, for sure. And yeah, we're gonna do a little different this time. I know it's been a while, but I think I've given enough tips on internships and stuff. Some content for that might be coming out soon too. But I actually wanted to start shifting the podcast into talking about more product and startup based things. And so, just for this first podcast, I decided that to ask Eddie if you wanted to share some exciting startups, and I would share some exciting startups from me too, and we'll just discuss them. Pretty informal podcast. But yeah, before the show, got into Clubhouse and how interesting Clubhouse is. So I guess that's a good place to start. What are your thoughts on Clubhouse? It's definitely taking the world at storm right now.
Clubhouse, yeah. So I mean, like I was saying before we started, I think it's such an interesting concept. And beyond the fact that, the product has a unique value proposition and I can treat it like an interactive podcast that I can sort of just stream around and hop in on different conversations. It's the invite only and the exclusivity aspect of it, similar to what I think this email platform called Superhuman did in the Valley. That I think makes it so unique, right? Because, and we were talking about this, like it makes people like you and me who are not going to get an invite to Clubhouse really want to get in and try it out, right? So
Yeah.
there's all this buzz being created. There's all this demand being generated for this product that is just so exclusive at this point in time. And hearing about all the interesting conversations and stories of the folks that are on Clubhouse, so that's like the big celebrities and big names, is super cool. But like the question that comes in my mind is that when the floodgates do open to people like you and me, is that value proposition going to stay the same? Usually on these sort of platforms, we see positive network effects, right? The more people, the more value to each individual. And
Yeah.
maybe to a degree that will exist, but we saw on Facebook, with billions of people, there's misinformation being spread around. So
Yeah.
how is Clubhouse going to deal with stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big challenge for them. But as of right now, that strategy is really working out. Like you said, the exclusivity strategy. But what will happen once the floodgates open? I think I still think it'll be okay for this reason, like based on what I know about the platform. You're allowed, you only have a certain amount of people in the room, and there's a moderator in the room, so you can only talk once a moderator gives you permission to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so even when you have these rooms, uh, hopefully the moderators can take care of that if you have a certain amount of people. So if you're only like 20, 30 people and you have like five bad characters out of those 20, 30 people,
Right.
hopefully they can figure out who those bad characters are and get rid of them. But for sure, I mean, I'm not sure how Clubhouse will go, um, how go about, changing the rules or just trying to figure out who those bad characters are, identifying them, when they get onto the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, it's a problem with most social media, right? And every social media has still found a way of dealing with that for the most part.
I don't know. Has Facebook found a way to deal with it?
Yeah, yeah. um, yeah, I don't know. I
Tough.
do
I
keep
mean,
mixed
it's
friend
like
requests.
it's these really hard questions that come up when you reach that scale, right? And I mean, Clubhouse, I don't think it's going to reach Facebook scale like that soon, obviously. But it's interesting to think about these platform businesses and this platform economy,
Yeah.
how things can scale so easily, but what are the actual positive and negative implications of that?
And I think what you're probably going to see with Clubhouse is some pretty crazy growth because it has so much VC funding.
Oh
VC
yeah.
firms love. I mean, one of the things that sell people on is the amount of users that's on the platforms, right? So you're definitely going to see Clubhouse keep expanding rapidly. And so yeah, how does that maintain that identity? How does that keep the exclusivity? I think one way they are doing that actually is you can record anything in a Clubhouse room, or it's very tough to. I don't think natively you can record.
Mhm.
And so that itself, at least they're stopping people to a degree from accessing the content in Clubhouse on other platforms. So it's not that as easy, to get that content that you would on Clubhouse on YouTube and stuff like that, which I think goes a long way in retaining people onto the platform.
Right. Like, I mean, that also just adds to the aura of exclusivity and makes, folks like you and me question like, so what are they talking about? I want to get in on this. Like, it just keeps adding to that aura of like, I just want in. But like,
Yeah,
when is that going to happen? And like, how am I going to get in? those are questions. I think another really interesting lesson to be derived from companies like Clubhouse that, sort of create this exclusive platform and sort of generate a lot of buzz early is that if you actually try to like go to Clubhouse's website or like try to see like docs and information about them, like man, they're still on like Notion web pages.
Yeah.
Like they don't have like a full like web stack team developing a sick website and all of this.
Yeah.
And I think it just goes to show the value of really making a solid MVP, right?
Yep.
Like and my perception of this completely changed. The past year I've been working with a startup, and we did not implement user authentication until we had like 15 users paying like $3,000 a month. Like we
Wow.
did not have accounts.
Okay.
We were generating links ourselves, and we were passing those to the users, and we would like do data ingest ourselves, and it was crazy. It was crazy how much manual work we were doing. But the
Yeah.
reason was because no user had complained by that point that there's no account. Like nobody cared. They were getting the value from the platform, and for us it was important to just continue developing the features that they requested. So I think the same
Yeah.
thing, like the MVP, really just focus on what your user actually needs and wants, and like don't worry about all this flair that I think a lot of developers and PMs maybe get caught up in early on in the product lifecycle.
For sure. I mean, it seems like Clubhouse is still in like it is released their MVP onto the App Store. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And you know what's also crazy about Clubhouse? It's only available on iPhone, and I think that comes back to that targeted approach that they're taking, because no matter what you want to debate about between Android and iPhone always has that more exclusive feeling, right? That I'm on iPhone, I'm on iMessage, right?
Yeah.
And so they're really using that in order to push the app, which is really interesting. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where Clubhouse lies. Um, yeah, in general, even after the pandemic, to see how many people still use it, because I think it is a useful platform regardless. I don't think it's one of the only pandemic social medias.
Like it's an alternative to when I'd put on like a podcast on Spotify or something. Like I'll just hop into Clubhouse for like 30 minutes and see what's going on. And it's more engaging, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, like for big celebrities, why like a lot of them used to go to Instagram Live, but for them, one nice thing about Clubhouse that you can't get in Instagram Live is they can actually talk to their users, which is a big deal. In Instagram Live, it's more like you're talking to a wall and you're just sort of seeing the chat go like crazy, but that's a lot harder to interact with people than having a small Clubhouse meeting.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. I mean, it makes me think though, like we could make our own Clubhouse on Zoom, open some breakout rooms. And I mean, like you and I'll be there. We're pretty big names, right? So
Of
like
course, bro.
that'll bring people to our Zoom.
I just gotta text my boy, Tim Cook, Elon Musk,
Yeah.
come to the Zoom Clubhouse clone bar house. You can call it bar house,
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I guess we can transition now into some of the startups that we had. I asked Eddie to come bring some startups he was interesting. I made a little list. So the first startup, I guess I'll start. And just to preface, I get a lot of my news on startups from TechCrunch. So like 3 out of the 4 startups I have in this list are from TechCrunch, and I'll link it in the bio of this podcast. But one really interesting one that I saw was Wingcopter. And so basically, Wingcopter is this drone startup that is building the next generation of drones. And they just raised $22 million in a Series A round. And basically what their drone is it's a drone prototype that has a patented propeller system that allows them to take the advantage of vertical flight and long distance high speed flight. And so basically, like, I didn't go too much into the specifics, but one of the biggest problems with drones right now is, it's like a helicopter where you can go vertically, but that distance traveled is much harder, because to go horizontally is a lot harder, but you need that vertical ability. And
Right.
so their patented thing, the drone has a unique shape, and the propeller system has unique mechanisms to allow it to take advantage of both. And so the specs on it, their like main thing is a Wingcopter 178, which has which can carry 13 pounds while flying up to 75 miles with a speed of 100 miles per hour. And yeah, it's super interesting. And I think in general, the drone space is really cool, because I think right now the FAA actually put some new regulations that allow drones to be flown in night and around people. So 2021, I think, is gonna be huge for drones, and a lot of people have for a long time have been talking about, like, I've heard so much about drones, but they don't. It doesn't seem like it's going to be mainstream, or hasn't been mainstream yet. But
Right.
2021, I think, is really when you're going to see this with Amazon and Google and stuff like that, because of this new FAA regulation.
So what was holding drones back for the past few years was the regulation, you think?
Yeah, for sure. Because the FAA just approved them. As long as they have like a RID, like a remote ID, a frequency pinging to a tower,
Yeah.
they're allowed to deliver at night, and they're allowed to deliver in urban areas, which was two of the biggest things that was stopping drones. And that's coming into effect early 2021. And I guarantee you, Google and Amazon have just been like waiting for this thing to pass, because
Right.
Amazon's been like teasing their Amazon Prime Air for a long time now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I remember talking about Amazon drones when I was in like junior high or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
which was like 6 years ago or something, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's really interesting to hear that you think that's going to be like a reality, right? Like this
Oh yeah,
year. I mean, so with this startup though that you mentioned, what was the name again?
Wingcopter.
Wingcopter?
Yeah.
Right. So like they have this sort of, patented technology that gives you the vertical as well as the long distance. But like, so do you think that's going to be a competitor to like Amazon, Google or something? Or like what exactly is their positioning?
I don't know if it's gonna, like, they sell drones as a service.
Right. Oh,
So
sure.
they have their fleet, and then they license out to companies
Okay.
to let them use it. I think eventually what's probably going to happen is if their technology is good enough,
Yeah.
Google or Amazon might buy it out just to take their propeller system. Because that's a big thing with drones, right? Drones have always been thought about as a short-term delivery system, which of course it's really great at. But at the same time, because it's so small and mobile, if it can go long distances, it can that also can go a long way. So um, for example, if you have hikers in the woods, right, and they're doing a call for emergency, but helicopters can't get to them, whatever, or wind probably not a good example, but something happens and the helicopters can't get to them, they could send a drone out to their location to give them supplies for the night, right? And it depends how far they are in the forest and where they're going. But if the drone can cover more distances, not just short distances, then some of those problems can be eliminated.
That's really cool. And the idea with drones too, I think, like a really big thing is sort of how much of the carbon footprint it's going to reduce, right? Like
Yeah.
for let's say Amazon delivery. And that's like a really big issue, right? Like 2-day delivery, the logistical challenges with having to deliver so quickly and not being able to consolidate a lot of orders into one truck leads to just so many trucks on the road. And like when you have drones and you can reduce the number of trucks and the sort of like traffic congestion,
Yeah.
that's going to have a really positive impact on the environment too. I mean, beyond the fact that it's just cool.
And it's a lot faster, right? There's no
Yeah.
traffic. It just goes straight. It's a straight line. It's just as a bird flies. Um, and so think about it, like, you want to return something at Amazon, or you're getting your Amazon package. The drone comes, you hook it to the package. I think Google, this is what Google's doing with Wing. Um, I think it's Wing. But basically, they have a patent system where instead, one of the biggest problems is going vertical and horizontal, like I said, right? Because this
Right.
wastes a lot of energy when going like this. So what Google does is they actually put a payload down. You put whatever you need to in the payload, and then the payload comes back up into
Mm.
the drone. Um, so who knows, man? Like, you're returning your Amazon, you want to return something on Amazon, so the payload comes down. You put whatever inside, and it goes to the factory, or not the factory, but the warehouse to return.
I just returned something on Amazon for the first time ever, like pretty
Oh,
recently.
really?
Like I don't know why. For the longest time, I just thought it'd be like a daunting process. Like, oh man, dude, now I'm gonna have to like pack stuff and like where do I ship it and like how do I figure this out?
Yeah.
And I finally had to return something. It's because I ordered a pull-up bar and it had like a defect.
Okay.
Um, it was actually really straightforward, and I didn't mind returning it because you just had to print their label and then just send it. I didn't
Yeah,
know
you
what.
can, as long as you keep the box. That's in Canada. In the US, you don't even need to keep the box. They literally have these designated stores.
Yeah.
that you go to, like Kohl's or like whatever,
Yeah.
and they'll just take it and they'll wrap it and do everything. They just scan your barcode, you give the item, and they'll do it for you.
Bro, man, why is Canada always lagging?
But yo, man, it's crazy. It's almost as convenient. Like it's as convenient as going to a store now,
Yeah.
and it's more convenient than going to a store because you get to order stuff at home. And the biggest thing is that time part, like I mentioned. But
Yeah.
now with same day delivery, you can get it in like within 12 hours. And with drones, you can order something from Amazon, and if it's in the warehouse locally, you can maybe get it in like 10 minutes.
Do you foresee, so like I thought it was really interesting. You said drone as a service, DaaS. I think we
Yeah.
have so many as a service things now, but drone as a service. One interesting startup, and this isn't one that I had sort of on my list to talk about, but
Yeah.
that I think is really cool regardless. It's called TiltGo, right? And what TiltGo is, it was actually founded by U of Waterloo students,
Okay.
and they went to YCOM, and so so essentially, um, TiltGo is kind of like Uber for local deliveries, in that if I'm like a local flower shop, right? And I want to offer same day delivery to people of my city. Um, I can like use this platform, TiltGo, to find somebody who maybe like rides a bike around to pick up these flowers and like deliver it to the person.
Yeah.
Um, but what I think is interesting about this like drone as a service concept is, can these like local shops that want to start competing on this sort of like same day delivery level that could maybe afford it
Yeah.
start doing that, right? Like it becomes a vessel for anybody to start offering fast delivery, putting people on a playing level field.
So that's actually what exactly what Wing is doing. The Google startup.
Yep.
What's owned by Google, it's a startup. But that's exactly what they're doing. They're offering drone as a service as well. And
Yep.
that's what the payload is. So if you have a local business, you make cupcakes, the payload comes down, you put the cupcakes in, it goes up, goes to
Yep.
you put a designated zone in your lawn, and the
Mhm.
drone comes to the designated zone and puts the cupcake down, you pick it and take it. And it's meant for local businesses. It's meant so small businesses can do that.
So, and are these drones robust to like different weather conditions? Like, is there?
Yeah, I think it depends on the design. Like obviously, if it's windy, that's a tough thing, especially if the drone is, um, if the drone is small,
Yeah.
it's gonna obviously react more to the weather conditions. But I think as technology goes from V1 to V2, these are the type of things that will get solved. Um, I mean,
Right.
same even with cars and stuff, right? Like we solved a lot, like with tire grips and stuff like that. With rain, we solved a lot of issues. And this might be a little harder because in the air, it's a lot. With wind and stuff, there's a lot more factors, I guess, than like water under a tire. But even then, I think they can figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, imagine like it's a dark and stormy night, and your lone drone is flying through the air and gets like struck by lightning. Like,
Yeah.
what's gonna happen?
Well, that could happen to your Amazon delivery guy too, right?
Oh God.
He's driving the truck and the lightning.
I guess fair point.
But yeah, I mean, but I mean, you know what? If especially because they're building drones in an era where AI and ML is so present,
Mhm.
when they start flying them out and they start collecting more data, these are the type of points that they can start accounting for, right? So if wind speed's going a certain way, or climate, or then temperature a certain way, they can see how the drone moves compared to like because of that, and start making ML models to start counteracting towards that or counteracting against that. Um,
Yeah, dude, like it, because whoever, I mean, it seems like Amazon, Google, and the startup you mentioned will get there real soon here, but like the data that they can start collecting through these drones moving through the air, and about like different, I don't know, like air traffic patterns and stuff as well.
yeah.
Like it's interesting to think about what that data will look like and sort of the actionable insights they can derive from it. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, yeah, they can throw power into different systems in the drone in order to counteract that, or just in general because they have cameras going on top, which is I guess an ethical question, or like another question. Like that's a scary part about drones, that they literally have cameras probably in the drone to see where
Yeah.
they're going, and they're probably recording everything they're doing.
Oh man, Big Brother is watching. Big
Um,
Google is watching.
so I wonder if there's going to have to be like a certain path that the drone has to take, like they have to go on public roads, because otherwise if they start flying over people's houses, they can literally just record random people in their houses, right?
So I'm imagining like Google must be leveraging their like maps technology in like to a really
Yeah.
high capacity here, right? And so if you have a drone that follows the same path a car would follow on the road, but like the drone follows it in the air, just like on like a higher vertical scale, like is that something that you could actually manage, like have traffic between the multiple drones? So like you have like, two-way traffic like in the air for these drones, and or does that like diminish the sort of like speed and sort of what the value proposition of drones are?
I think you could, just because like one road is big enough for a car, but it's gonna be big enough for like 5 or 10 drones if you go like this way,
Fair.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and just in general, I mean, there's so many layers. In the air, it's not a flat surface, right? It's different layers at different altitudes. So even if the drones are spaced between each other by like a meter, and you have like 10 different like heights between those, then it should be fine given the width and the heights. If we start going beyond that, I think there's going to be an issue with too many drones in the sky, because literally all we'll be seeing is drones going back and forth, and we're going to be like, yeah, this is sort of...
Dude, I mean, but like imagine, and this is must be many decades off, but like right now we have civil engineers and like landscapers and stuff that they're like designing cities, right? Like they design like the roads and like where buildings go, all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
as like the big companies collect more and more data and they have an understanding of like who's ordering, who's a part of the network, where do drones need to be able to go quickly. Like imagine like having to lay out air traffic structure, right? And like actually in the drones like minds, right? Like in the model, somehow actually map out um, what the air traffic and landscape should look like as well.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think beyond the roads, there'll probably be like authorized paths that the drones can take.
Yeah.
So it's still keeping people's privacy in mind, but the drones can still take those paths. And for example, it could be like a river or something, right? Like the drones can go over a river because that's not that big of a deal. There's a lot of different factors in it, and in fact, that's probably it's a really great space, I think, to get into right now, because that new FAA, I kept saying FAA ruling that's coming out in July, and plus so much venture capital is going to drones right now. So I think it's a great space to get into. But we'll see what happens. I think a lot of stuff will change, and I'm sure smarter minds than us have already started like thinking about these different issues. But if you want to start, defining what that might look like, it might be a time to make a drone startup.
Wow, man, that's sick. Yeah, drones I feel like have been talked about for so long, but it's really exciting to hear that it's happening.
Yeah, it's like, whenever I heard about drones before, it was always from the context of like, oh, you can take really cool photos of cities and like creep people and stuff like that, right? But like now it's actually becoming a reality where it's not only about doing that or a hobby. It's actually becoming like a very big part of our society functioning, or it can be, at least. It's not right now, but
yeah,
yeah, we'll see what happens, man.
that's huge. Very cool.
All right, you want to share your first startup?
Yeah, so I mean, this is like a pretty big pivot, but it's a startup called Mythical Games. Okay.
Okay.
Have you heard of it?
No.
Look, so this startup, they think the future of games is blockchain and a digital
Blockchain.
economy.
Okay.
Block. They have developed a blockchain game engine and like have created their first game, and their plan is to sort of license this engine to so many more developers, because the CEO, he's like an ex-Activision guy, right?
Okay.
So he comes from a background of, he's worked on Call of Duty, a lot of free-to-play games, and sort of where this idea of implementing blockchain in games came from was owning digital assets. That's where it comes from.
Okay.
And sort of validating and proving scarcity in a digital economy. So think of it, I don't know, from like this lens. When I am playing like a free-to-play game and I want to buy, like, I don't know, I'm playing like a Spider-Man game, I bought like Spider-Man shards, and
Okay.
like I use that to buy something in the game, whatever, and I'm probably going to keep buying some more shards if I like this game, but I'll get bored at some point, and then like I've just lost that money, and I don't really own anything. I still just have this like game on my mobile phone, for example, but
Yeah.
I haven't like actually gained any value.
Those shards are gone. Yeah.
Those shards are gone, right? But with this like digital, with this blockchain game engine, in this digital asset economy, I as a player, and think of this like, you know, a lot of game markets already have secondary markets, right? Where like I buy items and I like sell those to other players. So it's like legitimizing that in the sense of I can play to earn. So when I play this game, and let's say it's an MMORPG, and I like earn this sword, like maybe there's only literally 10 of these swords in existence in this game right now. And let's say there's like 1 million players on this platform.
Yeah.
Like with blockchain, everybody has the public ledger. Everybody knows there's only 10 swords. Nobody can change that. Like, like there's so much more security added because it's on blockchain.
Right.
And now this sword is actually worth real money because I have earned this sword, and like there's literally only 10. And since, you know, there's value around being on this platform, I can sell this for like real money. It's like a real digital asset that has value. And something that took off for 2 years ago, actually, I think it's like the best example of a blockchain based game is called CryptoKitties. Have you heard of CryptoKitties?
No.
So CryptoKitties, what this thing was, it was literally, you could sort of buy like these digital cats, and it's like an image of a cat. These cats have like many characteristics, right? That make each cat unique. And there's literally like billions of combinations of these characteristics and sort of genes that can go into a cat that make it like really unique from anything else. And they're also just like very cute. So people wanted them. And dude, there was like 40 million plus dollars or something spent on these crypto cats.
Really? Okay.
People wanting to just own these digital assets because they know that they're the only ones that own them. They have value. And then you can even like breed different cats you get, and like you get generate even more unique combinations, right?
Interesting.
And so I think what's really interesting about like Mythical games and sort of what they see in the future as, you know, like this digital asset economy, and the future of games is like owning items, is that like it's really going to revolutionize how we sort of think of a game. Because maybe right now a game is a pastime or just an experience to be enjoyed. But in the future, it might actually be, and it'll be closer to, you know, maybe what some people want to avoid, in that it becomes closer to real life and then you become addicted, whatever. But like it gets closer to that. Because you can actually play to earn, and you can actually own what you gain in this game, which is cool.
I think what's really interesting about that is actually a CSGO has something similar where on the Steam, I don't play CSGO, but like at least I have friends who do. And on Steam, you can buy and sell skins for guns, and those skins have legitimate value. So I still remember my friend in high school, he sold one of his skins for like $300. And he bought it for like $10. So it's sort of, it's not using blockchain, it's using Steam's inbuilt thing. But same thing, he literally he found these skins on CSGO that were being undervalued, bought them, and then sold them for a greater value. He wasn't even playing the game to play. Like he was actually just taking the economy of the game and using that in order to make money.
Another example is like in like NBA 2K, right? Like they literally have this auction house where you can buy players, and it's a real market, and that player's value goes up and down depending on like supply demand. And then I think like where the blockchain takes it that extra step further is it just not only it like legitimizes the fact that this economy exists, you can actually verify the actual scarcity of the sort of items on the market, and it's more secure as well. And also it like makes room for this like unique digital asset, right? So like in 2K, my team, there might be like many LeBron James on the market, and he just has like lots of value because he's LeBron James. But in this game with that's built on blockchain, like there might literally only be one of this item. So like, what is the value of that? And that's what we saw in like the crypto kittens, which I think was really cool.
I think what's really interesting about what you're saying, like especially like you brought up NBA 2K, my team, and one of the things, you know, people always complain about like in FIFA, NBA 2K, whatever, is that The developers ultimately have control about how many of these cards are in circulation, which is fine. But it's like, they might spend so much money trying to get this card. They finally pack one. And then on this day, it's worth like, 1,000,000 my team points. And 2 weeks later, the developer just starts to go like burr and like starts going crazy with LeBron James cards. And now that LeBron James card is $2,000 or 2,000 my team points, right? So the cool thing with blockchain though is, the developers can still influence it, but at the same time, the market, like you can still understand it. It's still easier to have those different transactions, right? You can keep developers. You can find out what the value of the card is, like you said, based on how much the number is. And second, if the developers do something like that, then you can prove to them that, hey, it was like 1,000 here, and then you guys made it like 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 here. Like, what's up with that, right? And so you can hold them accountable. So from a player point of view, that's also really great. And then, like you're saying, yeah, maybe like video games can go from you do as a pastime to an actual job where you're earning stuff to resell onto the market.
Man, and think about like having games where, and this is an example that the CEO of Mythical Games brought up. It's like, games can have loyalty programs, and you can have interoperability between different games, in the sense of, let's say I got a digital asset, like I got some reward in, I don't know, like Skyrim or something, right? And like, I own this. I am the sole owner of this digital asset. And then like GTA allows you to import any of your digital assets, and it'll apply to GTA shaders and stuff. So now I can pass along digital assets between games. And it's still independent. Like, developers don't need to like worry about, like having like special sort of interoperability, because it's interoperable in the sense of you just apply the shader onto whatever this digital asset is. Because at the end of the day, what you own is the code, right?
Right.
And that, like, those characteristics, and sort of like whatever what do you call it? Like the actual digital asset, like just apply the game different shaders, and now I can use that across different games.
But what if we go one step? The only problem with that I see with the shaders though is every engine will be different. So it depends how what the engine's built on, right? But
Maybe.
I think to go like one step further on that. For example, you have the sword. It's not sword. You have LeBron James, right? He's worth 1,000,000 my team points. You sell LeBron James, you have 1,000,000 my team points. What if you're able to take those 1,000,000 my team points and then convert that into a centralized cryptocurrency, like a game cryptocurrency, and then convert that game cryptocurrency into GTA money, and then use that money in order to buy things in GTA. And then when you sell things in GTA, you can take your GTA money, convert it back into the game currency, and then start buying things in Skyrim, convert that game currency to Skyrim.
Whoa. So you're saying like a cryptocurrency for games, and in each game, like, this cryptocurrency obviously has different value.
Yeah. So maybe not like I'm saying, like there's a centralized cryptocurrency that gets transformed into the game cryptocurrencies or the game currencies. Whoa, why does it say my max about to die? 1 second. Cool, and we are back. Sorry about that, guys. My Mac was running into issues. I have no idea what's happening. Yo, Tim, please. Out here trying to record a podcast, man. But yeah, going back to what we were talking about. Yeah, I don't know, like a centralized currency that can get converted into each game's respective currencies. And that way, like you said, that progress that you made in one game, you don't necessarily have to lose it. You can convert it into the next game or whatever, or like another game.
Oh, yeah, I did not think about it in that sense, right? Where like if I make progress in one game, that's really almost like me making progress in the other game too. And that's the thing Call of Duty recently did, right? They combined like Call of Duty Cold War with Call of Duty Warzone.
Yeah.
Because each game had like different users, but now you sort of like make progress in both if you play either.
And you know what? You even like if you don't want to necessarily, like if EA and Activision don't want to play with each other, like play nice with each other, you can even make like an AEA where it's like EA has a centralized one that works between FIFA and NHL, right? Or like whatever. Like they're different games. Activision has their own. But at least that way, the progress that you make in their own respective publishers' libraries will be shared. And so you have more incentive actually to play only that publisher's games because your progress in those games will be shared together.
Right. Oh, that's really cool too. Yeah, I know. I thought about it from that sense. Um, Maybe Mythical Games has thought about that. The real thing that they're pushing is like owning digital assets, right?
Yeah.
And so like the game that they came out with recently is called something like Block Party. And it's basically the idea, what happens in Toy Story when, I leave my toys in my room and then they like come to life and now you can start making your own worlds and all of that. But the thing is that like you can just make this sort of like unique identity for your toys, right? And these characters, and you can like own different toys. And then there's that secondary market, which has now become like the primary market in their game to actually, trade and sell these assets that you legitimately own. Like
Right.
Mythical Games does not have ownership of them. I think just like the concept that a digital asset can hold real monetary value, and like I can own something like that, like it's sort of like a paradigm shift for me. Like it just gets me thinking about other the ways that digital assets can be sort of used and leveraged.
I mean, they're essentially just making like it's like a cryptocurrency though, right? Because your cryptocurrency has a real world value too. They're just like making different blocks of that pretty much, like blobs, and adding a nice shader on
Well,
top of it.
your cryptocurrency, I mean, cryptocurrency has value because it's sort of just treated like a normal security at this point, right? Like Bitcoin, for example, is more like an investment vehicle than people actually getting into Bitcoin for the future of, oh, everything's going to be on Bitcoin later.
Yeah.
But I think with this, it's more like what's actually on the blockchain is sort of like the structure, right, of whatever this asset is. So like even imagine like code for like crypto kittens, it was like what are its genes, what are its like time to live, what are its like this, what are its that, and like you actually own that, and then yes, it has value because of others perceiving it to have value because there's scarcity of this thing. This is a cute cat and like I want to own it.
I wonder what it is though. Like the one thing I'm curious about is all the other blockchain solutions that I've seen, at least like because I've mostly seen in cryptocurrencies, is that you
Yeah.
still have like a standard thing, right? You have a standard cryptocurrency, and you can trade multiple of those cryptocurrencies, and that transactions put on the blockchain, right, on the ledger, right? So, but in this case, because you have so many unique objects, how do you relate that to one another in the blockchain itself?
Well, the blockchain just records transactions, right?
Yeah.
So like when I sell my kitten to somebody else, somebody will either mine or like with proof of stake, they will like validate this transaction. And once it gets validated, it will get attached to the blockchain. And it doesn't matter that like they were unique. It's just that, Eddie transferred Billy Cat to Daivik, and
Right.
that is like what's recorded on the blockchain.
Right. All right. I guess like the publishers would just when they're selling to the public, they would also record it on a blockchain, and that way that it'd be all recorded. Yeah, that could work. Really interesting, actually. I never thought about it like that.
I think like another like interesting thing, like another sort of development in blockchain that I think is like pretty recent, that I think it will make it easier for this sort of stuff to happen is particularly, I'll talk about it in terms of like Ethereum. With Ethereum 2.0, they're transitioning from what's normally been known as like a proof of work model to like using something called proof of stake. And so the issue with proof of work was based on like this concept of mining, right? Every time I make a transaction, miners will give a lot of computational resources to solve this cryptographic problem, and that it uses a lot of electricity and like it's not great for the environment, and it's sort of like becoming saturated at this point with how much computational power is actually needed, and it's also expensive, right? Like when I make a transaction, you have to pay a transaction fee. And so if I want to, let's say, store like an image on the blockchain, that's more expensive than storing like a string of letters because that takes more computational complexity to actually verify. Or well, like it costs in Ethereum, it's called gas. And so like I have to pay more gas, which is like a fraction of Ethereum to the actual miner. And so
Right.
with proof of stake, it's like changed to this idea that instead of like anybody just being able to mine, basically, uh, depending on your stake in Ethereum. So let's say there's like 1 million Ethereum available and I have, like 100,000. So I have like 10% of all Ethereum sort of like in existence right now.
Yeah.
Then for any given block, there will be a 10% chance that I will become the sole validator of this actual block. And like nobody else is like working on it. So all I have to do at that point is then um, all I have to do at that point is just like validate it. It's not like computationally complex in that sense. And there's financial incentive for me to actually validate it because I have a stake in Ethereum, right? If I like start putting fraudulent blocks onto the actual blockchain in this case,
Right.
then I will get penalized.
So basically,
Um,
you basically say like, yo, I didn't do this transaction, or like,
you're validating it, right? Like so within blockchain and in crypto, everybody has like this public-private key, right? And like
yeah,
they have these like digital signatures, and so um, like what changes in the proof of stake model is now instead of having to solve the cryptographic problem and like people know what the right blockchain is because there's proof of work in that like whatever chain has the most computational work done to it, that's the right one. Now there's just financial incentive to individual validators to like make sure that they are actually adding valid blocks to the blockchain, that they're not fraudulent. Because as long as like the transaction fees that are attached to each block are I think less than the stake that the person actually has in Ethereum,
right.
then it's more profitable for them to like just go ahead and you know validate it correctly.
Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna
and
lie,
and so
it's sort of over my head right now, but I think I sort of get it.
the main takeaway though, like the main point of this was
Yeah.
with this new proof of stake model, it's less computationally complex to store things like images um, on the actual blockchain, and there's a good chance that it'll cost less gas. Like transaction fees will be less, although it's still
Right.
warranted by like supply and demand. But as a result of that, then like with something like crypto kittens, right now the only things on the blockchain are the actual code. But like what people really value about crypto kittens are like the image, like this is my cat, this is my
Right.
pet, whatever. But really like the crypto kittens company actually own the images. So now
Right.
they can actually put the images on the blockchain. And now I don't just own the code and the characteristics. I literally own this image, which is what, I attached the value to in the first place.
Right. Right.
So I think it's like an interesting development recently that could lead to, us seeing more things like that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah. I think we talked about this for a bit, but I think overall like pretty cool discussion, and just in general, I think the future of games, like it's funny because FIFA Ultimate Team and all these different things used to be such a meme. It's like, yeah,
Yep.
you play whatever, but now it's like a thriving digital economy. And I still remember like in my first year at Waterloo, I saw a bunch of co-op positions for like marketplace developer and like FIFA Ultimate Team developer, and it was just like that. Like they're talking about how they regulate the economy, how they go above and beyond to find out what players are like spending money on, and all like it's actually a thriving economy now. So many people spend money on it, that I think the potential for a solution like you mentioned is huge.
Yeah. No, I mean Mythical Games really makes it sound like it's the future of gaming, and
Yeah,
I'm starting to buy into it a little bit. It's pretty
yeah,
cool.
for sure, man. All right, I guess I'll go to my second startup that I have. Or actually, I'm going to skip to my third one just because we're talking about blockchain anyway. So it's sort of similar to that. It's this company called iStox. And basically, what iStox does, iStox, like their goal is to open I'll just read what they're saying. Founded in 2017 and owned by the blockchain infrastructure firm, iStox's goal is to open private capital opportunities, including startups, hedge funds, and private debt that are usually limited to a small group of high net worth individuals and more institutionally accredited investors. iStocks allows users to make investments as small as $75 USD and keep its fees low by using the blockchain technology for smart contracts and to hold digital securities, which make the issuance process more effective and less costly. And so basically, marketing jargon aside, basically what it does is it uses blockchain so you can get private equity for companies that you weren't necessarily able to do that for. And it's interesting because for the longest time, I've had this idea, or I was just wondering, why can't you make a marketplace or something where you own, where like you can buy a stake in a startup that's private, right? Because I mean, investors do
Mhm.
that all the time, even if they're not publicly traded. If you have enough net worth, or if you have enough capital, companies will come to you privately and ask for you to like invest in their company, and they'll issue you some stake in the company, right? So I was wondering why can't you do a marketplace for that, where you can put your idea up and private retail investors could invest in private companies or small private startups. And so this is doing that, but with blockchain in order to make sure that those contracts are actually, issued or like actually enforceable.
Yo, so I mean, is it still private equity at that point though?
It
Really?
is
Like,
because public is if you're traded on a stock exchange, right?
okay.
Private,
But
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, like at that point though, it's like private equity that's publicly accessible to anyone, right?
Yes, yeah,
And so obviously, like maybe the rote definition for publicly traded is like it's traded on a stock exchange and then I can actually, anybody can go and buy it. But like I almost feel like it's almost just like another fungible asset that, investors like public trading investors can just include in their portfolio, right? And maybe that's a good thing. I have to think about this.
yeah. I think it is. I mean, it's definitely going to be more risky, just because when you're doing stocks, it's obviously more established companies that are gone public and are traded on the exchange. So then they come
Right.
under the U.S. jurisdiction for like securities exchange and stuff like that. So it is more risky from that point of view. But the big thing is, if you're a retail investor, you don't have to necessarily miss out on getting like investing in the next Facebook before it IPOs, or whatever, right? You can do it before if you believe in a company, um, even if you don't have that much capital. And then from a startup point of view, you don't necessarily have to rely on one whale or somebody to get capital from, right? You can be publicly funded. It's like Kickstarter, but there's actually something you're getting back other than just, you're actually getting shares back. We're getting some equity back rather than just getting like the first version of the product from Kickstarter.
Right. And I mean, like the risk comes from the fact that since it's not publicly traded at this point, like nobody really knows what the actual value of your shares are, right? If you're like a private retail investor,
Yeah,
until this company IPOs, like I might not be able to, like get
cash
payout on
out.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that's how it is right now too, right? Even with high net worth cap, oh, no, even right now with private equity, that's what it is. Um,
Right.
and that goes back into one thing where like VC funds and valuations sort of shaky when you hear like a company's like $6 billion worth. Where's that $6 billion figures coming? Like, where's that figure coming from? How is that determined? That can definitely be like, it's definitely like a question. But anyway, aside from that, very interesting. Like, I thought that was a really smart way of doing it. And I mean, we've already seen how crazy retail investing has become, with GameStop and stuff in the last couple of weeks. So I think this could be another big thing for retail investors.
Funny you mentioned GameStop.
Yeah, man.
Another big thing for another big thing for retail investors.
Hey, man. Yo, GameStop's a big deal, man. I obviously, I don't know if the shorts goes or like the short. I don't know if that will actually, like, GameStop itself will pay off. But the biggest thing that GameStop thought, like, showed was that before what used to happen in Wall Street is high capital individuals used to meet up with each other to influence stocks. Either they go up or down, whatever. Like the hedge funds used to do that, right? But what GameStop showed is you can actually have a collective of people. Like, you can influence a collective of people to concentrate on one stock. It's one stock. Do the exact same thing the hedge funds are doing, because you just pool the capital from that many people, and then you can influence the direction of the stock. And I think that's a big deal because I think Jammat or somebody said that like Wall Street Bets has now become the biggest hedge fund in the world, which you can obviously laugh at, like what that's jokes. But if you take 9 million people and you start adding their capital, it can become the largest hedge fund in the world. Um, Sort of crazy, but
It is crazy. I mean, it's such a big paradigm shift, right? Like actually thinking that, I mean, and this is what it should be from the beginning, but like now realizing that the people just have so much power and like they can come together to really say F you to Wall Street in a way.
yeah, man. Yeah, it's it's pretty funny though because you'll see Wall Street's been doing this for years, but the moment the little guy figures it out, they're like going crazy trying to find out how, like, any way of stopping it. Um, so I think, look, definitely Wall Street's going to be aware of it, and it's funny because it's like it started like the science of it. We're starting to come from every year, like from the last couple of years, but this was sort of like the perfect storm where somebody gave a really good value proposition to that many people that it's so heavily shorted and at such a low market cap that we could influence the stock, and then everybody decided to actually go along with it. And so now it's actually like a proven thing rather than just a sign that might happen. And I'm really surprised it happened so quickly. But yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, interesting.
But
Wow,
yeah, that's iStocks.
that's cool. That talks is cool. Yeah, I can talk about another startup I brought.
Yeah.
This is like a much smaller startup, and I'm paying kind of homage to my school because it's out of Western.
Okay.
And so essentially it's called Neutral. And I think this ties maybe partly back to what we were talking about at the beginning with drones and like reducing carbon emissions. Neutral is a Chrome extension that helps you reduce your carbon emissions or offset your carbon emissions when buying stuff online.
Okay.
So the idea is that when I make a purchase on Amazon and I say 2-day shipping, that has a pretty negative impact on the environment. I think like on Prime Day alone, Amazon generates way more carbon emissions than you would ever imagine, right? And that has a significant impact on the environment. So the idea is that, okay, I download this Chrome extension. I have like a neutral wallet. So let's say I put $10 in my wallet for neutral. And so when I make a purchase on Amazon and say 2-day shipping, they've developed like this algorithm and they're using a data set to figure out, okay, depending on where you're located and what you've ordered and where the fulfillment center is, what is the actual expected carbon emissions going to be from like you choosing 2-day delivery right now. And it will sort of, they've like partnered with these NGOs and that like work to, reduce carbon emissions.
Right.
And so as you check out, it'll say, okay, do you want to take like, let's say 50 cents out of your neutral wallet right now to exactly offset the carbon emissions that you've just created by making this online purchase? And those like 50 cents will be like donated to like the NGO, and that like will contribute enough to them to be able to actually offset the carbon emissions you're producing by making that online purchase. And I think the general idea and I think like what makes it so interesting is it just gets you thinking about like, is online shopping and e-commerce everything like truly the future? And I think like tying it back to the drones, like maybe the drones are what will make it more sustainable for the long term.
Right.
But if like drone technology didn't come and like we maintained at our current pace, is what Amazon is doing like sustainable in the current state?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's super interesting. Yeah, first of all, talking about neutral itself, that's a really interesting thing, concept. Definitely for people who are you know who want to reduce their carbon footprint, that's a great accessory or extension.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it lets you even if you aren't as aware on it, it lets you figure out how much of an impact your decisions can have. So at
Right.
least it lets you be more aware, and then if you do want to contribute back, you can make sure that you're trying to be as sustainable as possible. So that's definitely a really cool extension. coming back to the Amazon part, um, I think it's a little interesting. I don't necessarily see Amazon like I know obviously Amazon has more shipments and stuff like that, so that contributes more to the carbon, like carbon emissions and stuff. But now what they're doing is they have, especially for a lot of stuff available on Prime, if it's an item that a lot of people buy, they'll put it in the warehouses that are local, right? And then
Mhm.
ship that over, which isn't that much more different than a shop if you think about it, right? Because usually shops will order different items to stock at their store, which people buy, and then people come to buy it. So it's not necessarily too different from that point of view, as long as it's those prime items. But it's the other stuff that really add to the carbon emissions, I feel like.
I think it's like it comes from um, when you choose the like quick delivery options, right? And the reason for that is when you have a store and they start like shipping things to the actual store to hold as inventory, they fill up the trucks, right? Like, and they can time out their actual shipments
Right.
so that they aren't, putting that many trucks on the actual roads. But with like Amazon, and if I'm like, I do 2 day shipping and then somebody else does 2 day shipping 1 day later, like Amazon's already shipped the thing that I ordered 1 day earlier, but like there's the possibility that, our orders could have been fulfilled together. And I mean, but that's happening on the scale of like billions of people,
But
and
but this is what I'll challenge you on that, right? Is right now a lot what like I said, what Amazon's doing is a lot of the stuff that people are going to buy in a certain area in a warehouse, they'll store it at a local
right.
warehouse, right? And so, what is the difference between me driving to a store to buy something or Amazon going from a local warehouse to give me the product, right? I mean,
Oh, I see your point now.
you see my
Right.
point, right? Like that, it's that the only difference would really be that Amazon truck driving from the warehouse to my house or me driving from my house to the store. Because
Sure.
to get to the store, to get to the warehouse is going to be the same carbon emissions,
So the
or
main
around
change
the
they've
same
made
carbon
now is
emissions.
that like with better predictive analytics, like they know what they should be storing in the warehouses, and now they don't need to like really ship it out from far away. It's all in the
Yeah.
local fulfillment centers, and so it's similar. That's interesting. That's a good point.
Yeah. But like I said, like it depends, right? Like if they don't have it on the store in a local fulfillment center, then it's going to be coming from another one. So that definitely impacts carbon emissions. But then it goes back to the other point where it's also like you can go to a store and they just don't have it at all, right? So it's like
Yeah.
you can't stop people from buying stuff they need. But regardless, I mean, this is a really great extension that, uh, like before, even if you're going to the store, it's not like you knew what your carbon footprint was or what the carbon footprint of the item was, right?
Exactly.
This goes
Yeah.
actually adds to e-commerce, I would feel like, because it allows you to know the carbon footprint and get the stuff you need.
Exactly. Yeah. It just increases awareness, and I think like these kinds of things are going to be really important, like in the future, because I think with a lot of issues that are becoming more prevalent in our world, I feel like we're so unaware of them, in
Yeah.
our daily lives. And so things that can just remind us in like daily life activities, like making an online purchase, that remember, global warming is a thing and we need to do our best to like offset carbon emissions so we can like survive. I
Yeah.
think like that stuff is important on a mass scale when you accumulate many users, because those are the little things that can maybe drive a shift in behavior. Because I mean,
Yep.
people have been talking about global warming and carbon emissions for years, and like
Yeah.
in your like how many people's daily lives has that actually impacted? Like how many decisions are actually impacted by all this really big talk? Probably not a lot. And it's these little things that can make those reminders in our daily lives that I think will maybe drive more of the impact that we want to see.
I have two more takes though about that. One sort of positive and one negative about that. So the
Okay.
positive one is it could really help from the perspective of if you have two things from Amazon, like I want to buy
Right.
pencils, right? And I have two listings on Amazon. I don't really care about the differences between the two. If I see
Mhm.
that one will has a smaller carbon footprint than the other, that could be an actual decision factor of when I'm purchasing stuff, and it can make manufacturers have to be more aware about their carbon footprint because right now
That,
they don't necessarily need to be. But if it's actually like a choice that people like, if people have a choice between them and their competitor, they don't really have any brand loyalty, that could actually be a decision factor, right? So
Yep.
that's a positive spin on it. The negative spin on it could be, and this is more of like the we're living in a controlled society type of thing, but like a completely controlled society type of thing, is that if Amazon wanted to, it can make a backroom deal with somebody and be like, okay, we'll store your stuff in the fulfillment center, um, and so it has a smaller carbon footprint, and so people are going to be more likely to buy that. But I mean, that's like a very doom gloom scenario. I think in general, it's probably going to be a positive impact. So that's another thing to
Wow.
think about.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting thinking about it's because it's not really, easily measurable and not really easily observable right now. But it's interesting thinking about retailer or manufacturer's carbon footprint as like a competitive advantage,
Yeah,
right? And that actually becoming like, and I don't see that as like completely unfeasible, right? Because like with so much emphasis being placed on corporate social responsibility and like Gen Z being all about this life, I think that um, sort of wanting to see that and like holding big corporations more accountable is something that we can see happening in the next decade.
yeah, and I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, people are usually not willing to pay more money than their competitor. But at the same time, if I'm buying like a $15 like snack pack or something, I don't know, like and one's like 15.30, one's $15, but the one that's $15.30 has like half the carbon footprint. I'm probably more likely. I'd probably more likely buy the 15.30 if I know it has half the carbon footprint. Um,
Yeah.
so definitely, like, it really depends. I don't know what those margins would look like if you're a completely sustainable business. How much extra money you would have to put on your product, which is probably, it's been the biggest factor against sustainable businesses or like
Yep.
carbon neutral businesses. Um, but I mean, as tech advances, that margin should definitely decrease.
It's so interesting, right? Too, like in when companies release like their annual reports, and historically the annual report has just held the financial information, right? Like what was my ROI, what are my actual margins, like what's my financial position, and that's what's like really important to investors.
Yeah,
But recently, in the past few years, the concept of something called integrated reporting, which includes obviously all the financial stuff that's important to investors, but also like the actual company's narrative and what they're doing with regards to like corporate social responsibility.
yeah,
That's becoming an actual like a piece of importance to investors in making their decisions and knowing if the company is actually doing the right things. So like maybe company didn't have a great fiscal year, but they did a lot of great things in terms of CSR,
yeah.
and I as an investor I'm still like confident. So like the value change is happening, like the
Yeah.
perceived value.
And I think the biggest thing for investors right now is they realize that, as governments become more carbon aware or aware of, like, aware of these climate issues, they're going to tax these corporations more, right? So the better you
Yeah.
set yourself to be carbon neutral right now, the better it is. And it's really funny actually when you're talking about that with the reporting. It's not necessarily reporting, but whenever Apple has one of these press conferences, they always, without fail, when they're done revealing the product, they'll be like, let's talk about the environment, and they'll just like throw, it's like 100% BPA free, and like they'll keep going ham with all these like terms. And I'm like, yeah, it seems pretty like it
Oh
seems
my
pretty
God.
good for the environment, man.
Dude, it was so funny when Apple took out the charger, right, from like the box, and
Yeah.
then Samsung like made a meme about it. They're like included with every Galaxy as like a picture of a charger. And I think like 8 months later, Samsung made in their release for the next phone, like they're like for environmental reasons, we're removing the charger from the box, and this makes it more streamlined. And it was like,
But
oh, crap.
you know what? Samsung, I still feel like they would like handle it better because they put a coupon in the box. I'm pretty sure, like for the
Mhm.
S21. So if you wanted to get a charger, you can. What Apple
Yep.
did is they said that like 97% of people already have a charger or whatever, right? Whatever stat they put up. But most of those people only have like a USB-A to charging port. They don't, or like a brick. They don't have a USB-C brick, but they gave a USB-C cable in the box. So 97% of these people are gonna have to buy the brick, which sort of defeats the point for the environment, right? Um, but anyway, I'm not gonna get into that. I still want a job at Apple, guys. So please don't don't disqualify me. You're a great company.
Oh man.
But all right, let me go into my second one. So I guess this one's sort of unique. With the it's called X1 card, and basically what X1 card does is it determines your credit limit based. It's a credit card. Sorry, it's a credit card that determines your credit limit based on your income, not your credit score. And so basically, your
Whoa.
credit score is only used to determine your APR rate, or like the interest you'd have to pay if you're behind on your payments. But
Okay.
as long as you're giving your payments, it'll actually your credit limit is based on your future and your current income. So the reason why this is good, in my eyes, is because right now your credit score could be affected from like a bunch of reasons. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it should just when you have a credit limit, it should just be on your ability to pay your credit card, right? Your financial ability to pay your credit card. Because at the end of the day, if you don't pay your credit card, you're going to be racking up interest anyway. And you're going to have to pay that back, right?
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, me and you included, when we first come out of university, we have a pretty like mediocre credit score most of the time, right? Because a lot of us, just got our first credit card, or some of us don't even have our credit cards. But might be working, especially in engineering, you might be working like a six figure job, but your credit limit's like $1,000, even though you can like definitely pay that off,
Yeah.
right? And so what X1 card does is to address that problem is that it actually looks at your income coming in and it gives your credit limit based on that. So if you are a university student, because you have a six-figure job, you should have an appropriate credit limit. It shouldn't just be based on your credit score. Um, and so yeah, I think it's a really interesting company, and it just goes back like to this general theme that's coming up, which is democratizing finance for a lot of people. And I know, like, of course, Robinhood's a big, like one of the biggest examples of that. Uh, right now, they're getting a lot of flack, fair enough. But like I say, like, but in general, like they were the biggest company where they made stocks, which used to be such like a private domain where people don't really know what's going on, and trying to democratize that. And this is the same thing, right? These guys are trying to change the credit card game, where something as archaic as a credit score is now getting shifted in something that makes more sense than just having a basic credit score. But yeah, it's a cool company.
That is very cool. I didn't even I, I think like maybe I've thought about that like subconsciously,
Yeah,
like why my credit limit is tied to my credit score, which again, like you said, like when you come out of university, you could have a really high paying job, but like probably a mediocre credit score. Um, that's really interesting. Like credit score, like do you think that for like big lending decisions then, right? Like
yeah.
when you actually like take like a mortgage on your house,
Oh,
that there should be like a
one sec, one sec,
similar.
one sec. Sorry. Hello.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
no worries.
yeah. So like when I take like a mortgage on my house or something,
Yeah.
like they shouldn't look at my credit score.
So this is a credit card company.
I know.
They probably would look at your credit score, um, because they want to make sure you're going to pay back your mortgage payments.
Like
But
what I mean is like, pay back my mortgage payments or like pay back my credit card. I'd still just like measuring my ability to pay back this certain amount, right?
right, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the way they're doing it is the right way, where they should assign your credit limit based on your income, and then they should assign your APR or your interest depending on your credit score, right? Because your in your income is your coming income will show like, okay, what it allows you to set like a range of what your credit limit should be, right?
Okay.
Um, while the interest being based on your credit score is sort of like the history of how you return those payments, right?
Right. But okay. Well, like, do they talk about how they actually predict future income? Because you said like they're using future income as well, right?
I'm not too sure about that. I didn't look that deep into it. I'm pretty sure it's like you have to actually put like pay stubs and stuff.
Uh,
And then it has to be like a reasonable, like in your application, you have to reasonably predict what it would be, and then actually go through your application.
right. So if I'm like a university, like if I'm like interning at companies and I put like my internship pay stub, like are they gonna make predictions based off that?
Probably, yeah.
That's
I mean,
interesting.
I don't know how it worked for internships. I assume this is more for full time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe this is the card for us to hop on because I know, one of the biggest problems for me when I was starting out, or for a lot of students actually, is everybody wants you to have a high credit or decent credit score, is so to get a credit card, but at the same time, in order to get a credit score, you need to pay off stuff with your credit card, right? Like you have to pay off your credit card. You have to pay off your credit card to get a good credit score, but to get a credit card, you need a pretty good credit score.
Yeah, it's like the chicken egg problem.
Exactly. And so most of the time they make you do a secured thing where you put like if you want a $1,500 limit, you have to give them $1,500,
Hmm.
right? And then you can get a secured card. But that's like I think that makes so like I don't know. I think it's a very behind system. Like I understand it fundamentally, but at the same time, if I'm working $100,000 job, it seems sort of ridiculous that I can't get a credit card, right?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Is this just like in the Valley right now? Or like where are they based?
No, it's anywhere in the U.S. It's a U.S. credit card company. It's called X1 Card. I'll link it in the bio if you're a student and you're starting off and you want to help these guys out and beyond like the actual credit limit and stuff. They are trying to modernize the credit card, so they're trying to add better rewards, trying to make it have more of a modern look and stuff. That could be a bunch of marketing. You have to check into the website. I haven't looked that deep into it. So like if you get scammed from this credit card company, don't blame it on me. I don't
Whoa,
take
whoa, I am fully going to blame it on you.
I don't take responsibility for anyone, but yeah, even like the rewards and stuff they had looked pretty nice. Their app, I think they had like a bunch of I think it had like a feature where it allows you to see the subscriptions when they're expiring based on your credit card, based like when you got on your credit card. So that's really pretty neat. There's a lot of stuff you can do in credit card domain. So, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's sick. I mean, like it's really interesting thinking about these disruptive companies in the world of finance, right? Because like financial institutions for forever have just been, like the most sort of institutionalized institution
Yeah,
that, it feels like how can they be overtaken? And like big banks are just, it feels like they have all the power. So hearing about like disruptive companies that, are like doing something that you could never have sort of thought of yourself, which is, yeah, like we're not using credit score, we're doing our own measurement,
yeah.
is just so interesting to see. That's cool.
Yeah, actually, one thing, I'll say that for another podcast. I think we're gonna go over if I start talking about this. But I had another idea in the world of finance, but maybe for another time. But
That's
yeah,
so
do you have any more startups you want to share?
no, I actually just brought two.
Okay, well, I have one last one before we end. This is one that I just recently discovered. I actually shot it to you before the podcast even started filming because I was really like, yo, this is really sick. Is this company called or not company, but this organization called Ground News. And basically, what Ground
Okay.
News does is it uses three non-for-profit organizations like they aggregates their scores, and then it'll show you news based on what those. Sorry, let me restart. Ground News basically shows you what the bias is there in a news article, and basically how it does that is it takes three non-for-profit organizations. It takes where on the scale they've listed these different news organizations, and aggregating that, it shows you what organizations or what leading organizations are pushing a certain news story. So, for example, if the Democrats did something great, it's more than likely the left organizations are pushing that story, right? Same thing with the Republicans on the right, just
Right.
out of nature, right? And so what this allows you to do is it allows you to see that bias for these stories, which especially in right now in the circumstances we're living in, everything is super biased. So it's great to have a way to see that bias in the news articles you're reading, so you know exactly what way you're getting influenced from. And I know that can be really frustrating for me, where it's like, I'm trying to figure out from both sides where people are coming from, because I like doing that whenever I see any news article. And so this allows me to sort of keep that in mind easier than just going on different Reddits to try figuring that out.
Man, I wish there was like a real-time version of that for like TV or like radio news or something. I don't even know. I don't even imagine how that would work. But like,
But the thing with TV, right, is like it's not real time. Like the thing with TV is they usually talk about the news stories that they make in articles in TV, right?
Right.
So you'll usually have like a text form of that, and they'll just rehash whatever they're saying in the article on the network. So obviously, like, a real time of that would be really sick. But even then, if you're reading the article on Ground News, which I'll link their website, it's up right now. It's a great platform. I'm using it right now too. Um, then you can still know on TV sort of where that bias is coming from. And
So
I mean, if you want to see like at these non-for-profits, they actually label the different biases that they think each news organization has. So you can verify for yourself if you agree with them on that. And then where they think those classifications were, which is actually not where they think, where the survey that they conducted put those different organizations. But yeah.
that's really interesting. And so you said that they're aggregating like the biases sort of informed by these three organizations, right?
Yeah.
Um, did you look into at all like how these organizations are determining bias?
Yeah, so basically, they're like I said, like they're doing surveys. They do public surveys that sort of ask the public, where do you think these biases are, the average American?
Yeah.
Um, which of course isn't a foolproof solution, but at the same time, I think as long as you survey enough people, it becomes pretty like decently accurate, at least from the average American point of view, which is probably where it should be based on. Because what is right or left, right? It's more of a perception thing. Uh, it's hard to find out who's in the center, so that's why it's nice to put in the average American right in the center. And the biggest thing is because it's aggregating between those three organizations, it
Yeah.
also reduces the chance for error. Like if one guy is skewing it a little bit, at least the other two should help. You know,
So I mean, the data set at this point must be large enough that, I mean, I'm sure somebody's like thinking of throwing it into a model and like making a classifier, right? Like, I'm just thinking like in the long term, will an objective result that comes out of like a ML model be more accurate than like these surveys that are really relying kind of on the law of averages? It's an
I.
interesting thing.
But how would that work? Because right now, basically, they're just classifying news organizations into right or left, right? But the thing with the like, yeah, I guess you could do sentiment analysis, but it's pretty hard. I don't know, man. It'd be
It's
really
really
hard.
complex. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because like the thing is, I mean, at a really high level, it's like feed like article is classified as left or right, let's say, right? Like or like some percentage to indicate where it is on the spectrum. And so like you feed that data set into the model, and then it's like, okay, now I feed like a new sort of article, interpret that, and then actually like spit out an answer based on like what you've been trained on. And then like the question is, okay, how do you actually like interpret an article? Um, and that would be like an
But
actual NLP problem too.
but I guess the NLP problem would be like, how do you classify it as left or right? Like in this case, what they're doing is they're showing how many left organizations are pushing a story and how many right organizations are pushing a story, or and how many center organizations are pushing that. So, for example, if the Democrats mess up, then the right organizations are probably going to push it more than the left organizations, and vice versa, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, this would
Um,
not work in its current state because, like right now, like you know, the model would have to like read the article and sure you do some sentiment analysis, but the data set was not on the basis of like sentiment analysis or like certain
yeah,
words. It's just people's perceptions.
and even like sentiment analysis, right? Like it can fact check, like the models can fact check stuff. Um, but how do you determine political leaning based on sentiment, right?
Yes.
Like you can't just be like, yo, this article mentioned Democrats 3 times. Okay, it's on the left. Like, like right, and no article is ever going to be like the Democrats did this well. So it's gonna clap like
I mean, it's almost like reading somebody's mind because like, these are words that somebody put on paper. You have to like the model would have to interpret like fundamental values this person might have
and I
from
mean,
these
even for
words.
us, like it can be challenging, right? Like a lot of times
Yeah.
you'll look at an article. See, if you look at an article, a lot of the times we have biases just based on where the article is hosted, right? Like if you go to a certain news source and we think it's a super left-leaning news source, we'll go in with that bias when you're reading the article inherently. But I
Mhm.
guarantee the moment you get rid of that news source, it's going to be a lot harder for you to find out if it's reading right or left. You can still probably figure it out,
Yeah,
especially depending how biased that article is. But in most of them, I think it'll be pretty difficult.
that's crazy.
And now you're asking like an AI machine to do that, right?
That's such a hard problem. Oh my God.
But
I mean,
regardless,
that's what makes ground news really cool, though, I guess, because like it seemingly solved the really hard problem, even though like it's not the fully automated ML6 solution. But I think it's like close enough for the average person that it's still really helpful.
and the cool thing is there's a lot of times if you're just looking at left leading media, you might miss some right leading stories. Maybe that's on purpose, but sometimes you want to get a different perspective. So they actually have a thing called blind spot on ground news. So if there's something that right leaning media is pushing a lot, in the blind spot, let's say for the left. So people who like for people who are on left leaning, if they want to see what the right is pushing, they can see that, and vice versa. Um, and so it's really, I think at the end of the day, it's really interesting because you get to understand where each person's coming from, where the biases are coming from, and they're apparent. They're more apparent. Um, because what's happening right now is a lot of times those biases are obviously going to be there, but we're just, nobody's ever, it's hard to figure out where the biases lie. Um, and what stories each side is trying to push, right? So so yeah, definitely very interesting.
So cool. That's
But
crazy.
yeah, with that said, check out Ground News. It's really cool. But if you have no more startups, then I think this is definitely a great conversation, man. I would love to have it again. It's fun times.
Oh man, I learned a lot. Definitely gonna look more into some of these startups.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
cool.
for sure, man. There's definitely a lot of cool spaces, and yeah, guys, stay tuned for more content. We'll see what happens. But till the next time, take care and bye.